The smell of fresh cut oak and hickory filled my driveway as I watched the 18-wheeler back up toward my property line. And I knew exactly who would come storming out of her house within the next 5 minutes. I'm Kyle Norton, and I'd been living in Willowbrook Estates in suburban Charlotte, North Carolina for about 3 years now. The neighborhood was nice enough, with well-maintained lawns and quiet streets lined with Bradford pears. Most of my neighbors were decent people who minded their own business. Most of them. Then there was Rebecca Bradshaw, our HOA president, who seemed to think her position gave her authority over every aspect of our lives. The truck driver, a burly guy named Tom, climbed down from his cab and walked over with a clipboard. "This the right address? 14 tons of mixed hardwood." "That's right," I said, signing the delivery receipt. "Just stack it along the fence line there." Tom nodded and started directing his crew. I'd spent weeks arranging this delivery. My family had a small firewood business we were starting up on the side. My brother and I planned to split, season, and sell firewood locally. It was perfectly legal. All the permits were in order, and I'd checked the HOA bylaws 3 times. There was nothing prohibiting a home-based business as long as it didn't create excessive noise or traffic. The wood had barely started coming off the truck when I heard the distinctive click of heels on pavement. Right on schedule. "Excuse me. Excuse me." Rebecca's voice cut through the morning air like a buzzsaw. She was speed walking down the street, her face already red, her shoulder-length blonde hair bouncing with each aggressive step. "What do you think you're doing?" I turned to face her, keeping my expression neutral. "Good morning, Rebecca. I'm accepting a firewood delivery." "A firewood delivery." She stopped at the edge of my driveway, her hands on her hips. She was wearing what I'd come to think of as her standard HOA uniform: pressed khakis, a polo shirt with the Willowbrook Estates logo, and that expression of perpetual disapproval. "Do you have any idea how this looks?" "This is a respectable neighborhood. It's firewood, Rebecca. People use it to heat their homes." 14 tons. She'd apparently heard Tom mention the amount. "Nobody needs 14 tons of firewood for personal use. What are you really doing here?" The delivery crew kept working, clearly trying to ignore the confrontation. Tom gave me a sympathetic look. I'd bet money this wasn't the first HOA dispute he'd witnessed. "I'm starting a small firewood business," I explained calmly. "Everything's legal and above board. I've got all my permits from the county." Rebecca's eyes widened and her face went from red to purple. "A business? You're running a business out of your home? That's absolutely not allowed." "Actually, it is. I checked the bylaws. Section 12, Paragraph 4 specifically allows home-based businesses that don't generate excessive traffic or noise." "I don't care what the bylaws say. I'm the HOA president, and I'm telling you this isn't acceptable." She pointed at the growing pile of firewood. "You need to send this back right now." I pulled my phone from my pocket and opened the camera app. I'd learned early on to document everything when it came to Rebecca. "I'm not sending anything back. This is my property and I'm well within my rights. We'll see about that." She turned to Tom, who was directing his crew with hand signals. Sir, stop unloading that wood immediately." Tom looked at me and I shook my head. "Keep going, you're fine." "He's not fine, I'm ordering you to stop." Tom scratched his beard. "Madam, I've got a delivery contract with Mr. Norton here. Unless he tells me to stop, I'm finishing this job." Rebecca whirled back to me. "Kyle Norton, I am giving you an official HOA violation notice. You have 24 hours to remove this wood from your property, or you'll face daily fines of $500. "On what grounds?" I asked, still keeping my voice level. "Unsightly storage, commercial activity, and creating a public nuisance." The wood will be stacked neatly. The business is permitted, and the only nuisance right now is you yelling in my driveway." Her mouth opened and closed a few times. "How dare you speak to me that way? I have the authority of the entire homeowners association behind me. Do you? Did the board vote on this, or are you making up rules as you go?" That hit a nerve. The truth was, Rebecca had a habit of acting unilaterally and claiming board authority after the fact. She'd tried this before with other neighbors. Old man Henderson had gotten a violation notice for painting his mailbox the wrong shade of white. The Mitchells next door got cited because their Christmas lights were up 3 days past the arbitrary deadline Rebecca had set. "The board doesn't need to vote on violations of existing rules," she snapped. "Good thing I'm not violating any rules then." Tom's crew finished unloading, and he brought me the final paperwork. I signed everything while Rebecca stood there, practically vibrating with fury. The commercial invoice was detailed. 14 tons of mixed hardwood, properly sourced from a timber company in western North Carolina, with all the relevant business tax numbers and permits listed. "All set, Mr. Norton," Tom said, handing me my copy. "Good luck with your business." "Thanks, Tom." I watched the truck pull away, then turned back to Rebecca. "Was there anything else?" "This isn't over," she said, her voice dropping to a threatening tone. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting. You'll be hearing from us very soon." She stormed off, and I finally let myself relax a bit. My neighbor Dave Miller poked his head out from his garage across the street. "She seems upset," he called over with a grin. "She'll survive." I walked over to inspect the wood pile. It was substantial, sure, but it wasn't blocking anything or creating any actual problems. The crew had stacked it neatly along my fence, exactly where I'd asked. The next few days were quiet, which should have been my first warning. Rebecca wasn't the type to let things go. I spent the time getting my equipment organized. I had a hydraulic log splitter, a couple of good axes, and plenty of safety gear. My brother Marcus was supposed to come up from Columbia, South Carolina that weekend to help me get started. On Thursday afternoon, I found the letter in my mailbox. It was on official Willowbrook Estates, HOA letterhead, signed by Rebecca and 2 other board members, Patricia Simmons and Douglas Wright. "Dear Mr. Norton," it began, in that passive-aggressive formal tone that HOA letters always seem to use. "The Board of Directors has reviewed your recent delivery of commercial timber products. After careful consideration, we find that your activities constitute multiple violations of community standards. You are hereby notified that daily fines of $500 will begin accruing as of Monday, November 18th, unless the material is removed from your property. Additionally, you are required to appear at a hearing on Tuesday, November 19th at 7 p.m. at the community center to address these violations." I read it twice, then called my lawyer. His name was James Pritchard, and I'd used him for the business setup. He was a good attorney, mid-40s, with a reputation for not taking nonsense from anyone. "Kyle, good to hear from you," he answered. "How's the Firewood business coming along?" Hit a snag. "HOA's threatening fines and wants a hearing." "On what grounds?" I read him the letter. He was quiet for a moment. "You have your permits handy, right here in my office." "Good, and the commercial invoice from the delivery?" "Yes. Bring both to the hearing." "I'll go with you. This should be straightforward, but HOAs can be tricky. They rely on people not knowing their rights." The hearing couldn't come fast enough. Over the weekend, Marcus drove up and we started processing wood. The splitter made quick work of the logs, and we spent Saturday and Sunday splitting, stacking, and organizing. We set up tarps to keep the seasoning wood dry and created an inventory system. It was hard work, but satisfying. Rebecca drove by at least 5 times over the weekend. Each time she slowed down to stare at my property, her face getting progressively more pinched. On Sunday afternoon, she actually stopped and took pictures with her phone. "Who's the angry lady?" Marcus asked, pulling off his work gloves. "HOA president. She's decided to make this her personal crusade." "Man, I'm glad I rent. This HOA stuff sounds like a nightmare." "It usually isn't. Most of the time they just maintain the common areas and enforce basic rules. But every now and then, you get someone like Rebecca who thinks they're running a fiefdom." Monday came and went with no further drama. I half expected Rebecca to show up with the police or something equally dramatic, but my driveway stayed clear. Marcus headed back to Columbia that evening, and I spent Tuesday preparing for the hearing. James arrived at my house at 6:30. He was dressed in a suit, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my log splitter. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." The community center was a small building near the neighborhood entrance, mostly used for yoga classes and book clubs. When we walked in, I was surprised to see about 30 people in the chairs set up in the main room. Apparently, word had gotten around. Rebecca sat at a table at the front with Patricia and Douglas. Patricia was a retired teacher, gray-haired and usually reasonable. Douglas was a financial advisor, mid-50s, who mostly seemed to go along with whatever Rebecca wanted to avoid conflict. Rebecca's eyes narrowed when she saw James. "Mr. Norton, this is an informal hearing. There's no need for legal representation." James smiled pleasantly. "Any proceeding that can result in financial penalties requires proper representation. I'm sure you understand." We took seats in the front row. Dave Miller was there, along with several other neighbors I recognized. Old Man Henderson gave me a thumbs up. Rebecca banged a gavel on the table. Where did she even get a gavel? "This hearing is now in session. We're here to address multiple violations by Mr. Kyle Norton of 842 Maple Ridge Drive." She proceeded to list the alleged violations: commercial activity, unsightly storage, potential traffic increases, noise complaints, and my personal favorite, degradation of community character. "Mr. Norton," Patricia said, more kindly than Rebecca, "would you like to respond to these allegations?" I stood up. "Yes, thank you. First, regarding commercial activity, I have all required permits from Mecklenburg County to operate a home-based business. According to HOA bylaws, Section 12, Paragraph 4, home businesses are allowed as long as they don't create excessive traffic or noise. I have 3 deliveries scheduled per week, which hardly qualifies as excessive." "Your opinion of excessive isn't relevant," Rebecca interrupted. "The board determines what's excessive." James stood smoothly. "Actually, Mrs. Bradshaw, North Carolina law requires that HOA restrictions be reasonable and clearly defined. Excessive without specific numerical limits is unenforceable." Rebecca's jaw tightened. "We'll see what our attorney says about that." "Speaking of attorneys," James continued, "has your association consulted with legal counsel about these fines? Because imposing $500 per day without proper notice and due process could expose the board to personal liability." Patricia and Douglas exchanged worried glances. Clearly, this was news to them. "Moving on," I said, sitting back down. "The storage is neat and organized. I have photographs showing that everything is properly stacked and tarped. As for noise, I'm only operating the log splitter between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. on weekdays, which complies with county noise ordinances." "What about the smell?" Rebecca demanded. "Fresh cut wood has a smell that carries." "The smell of wood?" I couldn't help the incredulity in my voice. "We're in North Carolina. Half the state smells like pine trees. A few people in the audience chuckled. Rebecca's face reddened. This isn't funny. You're turning a residential neighborhood into an industrial zone. I'm processing firewood, not running a sawmill. There's a significant difference. James pulled a document from his briefcase. I have here the commercial invoice for Mr. Norton's delivery. It clearly shows that the wood was legally purchased from Mountain State Timber Company, a licensed supplier. All applicable taxes were paid, and the delivery was conducted by a properly insured transportation company. He walked up and handed a copy to Rebecca. She snatched it from his hand and studied it, her eyes scanning the columns of numbers and official stamps. "This doesn't change anything," she said, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. The bylaws don't prohibit this," James said firmly. "I've reviewed them thoroughly. In fact, I brought my own copy." He pulled out another document, this one marked up with yellow highlights. Section 12, Paragraph 4, clearly allows home-based businesses. Section 18 governs storage, requiring only that materials be stored in a neat and orderly fashion, not visible from the street. Mr. Norton's wood pile is behind his fence line, barely visible from the road. "It's visible from my house," Rebecca practically shouted. "Your house is 3 doors down and across the street," I pointed out. "You'd have to stand in a specific spot in your yard and crane your neck to see it." "I shouldn't have to see commercial operations from anywhere in my home," Patricia cleared her throat. "Rebecca, I think we might need to reconsider this. If Kyle has all his permits and he's following the bylaws." "Don't you start," Rebecca snapped at her. "We have standards to maintain." "Standards that you're making up as you go," someone called from the audience. I turned and saw it was Henderson. "You tried to fine me $200 because my mailbox white wasn't bright enough. That's different." "How is it different?" Dave Miller stood up. "You've been harassing people in this neighborhood for years, Rebecca. Maybe it's time we voted on new leadership." A murmur of agreement ran through the room. Rebecca looked genuinely shocked. I don't think she'd expected this level of pushback. "This is inappropriate," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "We're here to discuss Mr. Norton's violations, not to air personal grievances." "Actually," Douglas spoke up for the first time, "I think Dave has a point." "Rebecca, did you discuss these fines with Patricia and me before you sent that letter?" Rebecca's silence was answer enough. "Because my signature is on that letter," Douglas continued, "but I don't remember signing anything about $500 daily fines." "I forwarded you the email," Rebecca said defensively. "You sent an email at 11 p.m. on Wednesday night and said you needed signatures by Thursday morning. I barely read it." Patricia nodded. "Same here. Rebecca, this isn't how we're supposed to operate. We're supposed to discuss these things as a board." There wasn't time. He was starting his commercial operation. James stepped forward again. "Mrs. Bradshaw, did you forge the other board members' signatures?" "I did not forge anything. They signed the letter." "Under false pretenses and time pressure, which could constitute fraud," James said mildly. The room went quiet. Rebecca's face had gone from red to white. "I want to see that invoice again," Patricia said suddenly. Rebecca handed it over and Patricia studied it carefully. "Rebecca, this is completely legitimate. Mountain State Timber is a reputable company. Everything here is in order. But the amount is Kyle's business, not ours." Patricia looked at me apologetically. "Kyle, I'm sorry about this. I should have read that letter more carefully before signing. There's clearly no violation here." "Thank you," I said. Rebecca stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Fine. Let him run his little business. But when property values drop and this neighborhood turns into a commercial district, don't come crying to me." "Actually," James said, Threatening property values is an interesting point. Making false claims about property values being affected by legal activities could constitute slander. It could also impact home sales if buyers hear that the HOA makes unfounded accusations against residents. Rebecca's mouth opened and closed a few times. She grabbed her papers and shoved them into her bag. I don't have to sit here and be attacked. Patricia, Douglas, you can handle the rest of this meeting. She stormed out, nearly knocking over a chair in the process. The door slammed behind her. Patricia rubbed her forehead. This is embarrassing. Douglas, I move that we dismiss all violations against Kyle Norton and waive any threatened fines. Seconded, Douglas said immediately. All in favor? Patricia asked the remaining board members. Aye, they said in unison. Motion passes. Kyle, again, I'm very sorry about this. You're absolutely in compliance with our rules. The audience applauded. Henderson let out a whoop. I felt tension I hadn't realized I was carrying drain from my shoulders. James shook hands with Patricia and Douglas. I appreciate your reasonableness. For what it's worth, I'd recommend the board review its procedures for imposing fines. North Carolina law requires specific notice periods and appeal processes. We'll definitely do that, Patricia said. And I think we need to have a serious discussion about Rebecca's role going forward. Over the next few weeks, life in Willowbrook Estates got interesting. Rebecca didn't resign as HOA president, but Patricia and Douglas started pushing back on her more aggressive proposals. There was talk of calling a special election for new board members. My Firewood business took off. Turns out people in Charlotte really liked locally sourced, properly seasoned hardwood. I got orders from restaurants wanting oak for their smokers, families stocking up for winter, and even a few contractors who used wood for decorative projects. Rebecca would still drive by occasionally, always slowing down to glare at my property. But she kept her distance. I made sure everything stayed neat and organized, gave her no legitimate reasons to complain. About a month after the hearing, on a cold December morning, I was loading an order for a customer when a Mecklenburg County code enforcement truck pulled up. A woman in her 30s got out holding a clipboard. Kyle Norton, she asked. That's me. I'm Jennifer Hayes from Code Enforcement. We received a complaint about commercial activity at this address. I sighed. Let me guess. Anonymous complaint, she smiled slightly. Not quite. It was signed by a Rebecca Bradshaw. She claimed you were operating without proper permits and creating safety hazards. I have all my permits. Would you like to see them, please? I walked her into my garage office and pulled out my file. She reviewed everything carefully. My business license, my liability insurance, my state tax registration, even my fire extinguisher certification. This is all in perfect order, she said. More organized than most operations I inspect, honestly. Thanks. I try to do things right. Mind if I look at your setup? Not at all. I showed her around. The wood was neatly stacked in rows, properly labeled by type and seasoning date. My equipment was well maintained and stored safely. I even had a dedicated first aid kit and emergency contact numbers posted. Mr. Norton, I'll be honest with you. This is one of the cleanest operations I've seen. Whoever filed this complaint was wasting county resources. Will there be any record of this inspection? Absolutely. And I'll note that the complaint was unfounded. If Mrs. Bradshaw files again without legitimate cause, she could face penalties for false reporting. After Jennifer left, I expected Rebecca to back off. Instead, she doubled down. Over the next few weeks, I received visits from the fire marshal investigating alleged fire hazards, the health department checking for pest problems, and even the environmental quality department looking into supposed groundwater contamination. Every single inspection came back clean. Every single one had been triggered by Rebecca's complaints. It came to a head in late January. I was reviewing my business finances when James called. "Kyle, I need to tell you something. Rebecca Bradshaw has filed a lawsuit against you." "For what?" "Operating a nuisance business, violating HOA covenants and reducing property values. She's seeking an injunction to shut you down and claiming damages of $50,000. I sat down hard. "You're kidding." I wish I was. But there's more. She filed it in her capacity as HOA president, which means she's using association funds and claiming to represent all homeowners. Can she do that? Not without board approval, no. I've already spoken with Patricia. She and Douglas had no idea Rebecca was filing suit. They're furious. What do? We fight it. And honestly, Kyle, I think we might be able to turn this around on her. Filing a frivolous lawsuit using association funds without board approval. That's serious. The next HOA board meeting was packed. Word had spread about the lawsuit and homeowners were angry. Not at me, but at Rebecca for using their money to pursue her personal vendetta. Patricia called the meeting to order. "Before we begin regular business, we need to address the lawsuit filed by Rebecca Bradshaw against Kyle Norton." Rebecca stood up. "I filed that suit to protect our community's interests. Kyle's business is—" "You filed it without board approval," Douglas interrupted. "Using association funds without authorization. I have authority as president to take necessary action." "Not to file lawsuits, you don't," Patricia said firmly. "That requires a board vote. It's in our governing documents. This is ridiculous. I'm trying to protect property values by harassing a neighbor who's following all the rules." Dave Miller stood up from the audience. "Rebecca, you've gone too far. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence." "You can't do that, actually," Patricia said, checking a document. "Homeowners can petition for a special election with signatures from 25% of residents. Dave, do you have those signatures?" Dave held up a thick folder. "Got 42%. People are tired of this." Rebecca's face went through several shades of red. "This is a coup. You're all ganging up on me because I'm the only one with standards. You're ganging up on yourself," Henderson called out. "Nobody made you harass Kyle. Nobody made you waste county resources with false complaints. And nobody made you file a lawsuit with our money." The room erupted in agreement. Rebecca looked around wildly, seeming to realize for the first time that she'd completely lost support. "Fine," she shouted. "I resign. All of you deserve what you get when this neighborhood turns into a slum." She grabbed her things and left. This time nobody tried to stop her. Patricia took a deep breath. "Well, that was dramatic. Douglas, do you want to take over as acting president until we can hold elections?" "I think you should do it, Patricia. You've always been the reasonable one." The lawsuit got dismissed 2 weeks later. James filed a motion showing that Rebecca had no authority to file on behalf of the HOA, and the judge threw it out in about 5 minutes. But then things got more complicated. Patricia called me on a Thursday evening. "Kyle, we've been going through the HOA financial records with our accountant. We found some irregularities." "What kind of irregularities?" "Money missing. About $30,000 over the past 2 years. I felt my stomach drop. "You think Rebecca took it?" "We're not sure yet, but the timing corresponds with her tenure as president. We're going to have to report it to the police." The investigation took months. Detective Michael Barnes from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit handled the case. It turned out Rebecca had been creating fake invoices for maintenance work that was never done, paying the invoices to a shell company she'd set up, and pocketing the money. "It's pretty straightforward embezzlement," Detective Barnes told me during one of his interviews. He was talking to all the board members and several homeowners. She got sloppy toward the end, started creating invoices for work that people could verify never happened. Like what? Pool maintenance during months the pool was closed. Tree trimming for trees that don't exist. My personal favorite, she billed the HOA for removing graffiti from the community sign. We checked the photos from the neighborhood Facebook page. No graffiti. How did she think she'd get away with it? Probably thought nobody was paying attention. A lot of HOA members don't scrutinize the financials. She had signing authority, so the checks went out without much oversight. In June, Rebecca was arrested. The local news covered it because HOA embezzlement cases had become surprisingly common. I watched the evening news showing footage of Rebecca being led out of her house in handcuffs, and I felt an odd mix of vindication and sadness. The trial happened in September. James recommended I attend, since I'd been one of Rebecca's targets. The prosecution argued that Rebecca had stolen over $32,000 from the HOA over 28 months. Her defense attorney tried to claim it was accounting errors and misunderstandings, but the evidence was overwhelming. Rebecca took the stand in her own defense, which her attorney later admitted was a mistake. She started out composed, explaining that she'd worked hard for the community and deserved compensation for her time. HOA board members are volunteers, Mrs. Bradshaw, the prosecutor said. You knew that when you took the position. I put in 20 hours a week. Nobody appreciates how hard I worked. So you decided to pay yourself by creating fake invoices. They weren't fake. Those were for services that would have been provided if I'd had time to arrange them. That's not how invoicing works, Mrs. Bradshaw. You billed for work that was never done and took the money. The jury took less than 3 hours to convict her on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 4 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. She also had to pay full restitution to the HOA, plus penalties. As Rebecca was led away, she looked right at me sitting in the gallery. Her expression wasn't angry anymore. It was something worse, broken and desperate. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Life in Willowbrook Estates got a lot quieter after that. Patricia stayed on as HOA president, and under her leadership, the board actually functioned the way it was supposed to. They maintained common areas, enforced reasonable rules, and stayed out of people's business otherwise. My firewood business thrived. I hired 2 part-time employees and expanded into wood products like cutting boards and serving platters. Marcus moved up from Columbia and became my full partner. We registered as an LLC and started looking at commercial space, but honestly, the home-based operation worked fine for now. I still thought about Rebecca sometimes. The whole situation had escalated so far beyond what it needed to be. If she just left me alone, she'd still be HOA president, still living her life. Instead, her obsession with controlling everything had destroyed her. One Saturday in October, almost a year after that first firewood delivery, I was loading an order when a car pulled up. A woman got out, maybe early 30s, looking nervous. "Are you Kyle Norton?" she asked. "That's me. I'm Bethany Bradshaw, Rebecca's daughter." I set down the wood I'd been loading. "Oh, hello. I wanted to apologize for my mother, for everything she put you through." "You don't need to apologize for her actions." "I know, but still. I've been going through her stuff, trying to understand what happened. She wasn't always like this. After my dad died 10 years ago, she got more and more controlling. The HOA thing, it became her whole identity." "I'm sorry about your father." "Thanks." Bethany looked at the wood stacks, the organized inventory, the professional setup. "Your business looks good. Mom was wrong about you. I appreciate you saying that. She'll be eligible for parole next year." "I doubt she'll come back to this neighborhood, but if she does, I'll make sure she stays away from you. Thank you." After Bethany left, I thought about what she'd said. Rebecca had built her entire identity around being HOA president, around control and rules and maintaining standards. When someone challenged that control, she couldn't handle it. She'd escalated and escalated until she destroyed herself. The next HOA board meeting, Patricia announced that they'd recovered most of the stolen money through Rebecca's restitution payments and the sale of her house. The association was in good financial shape. They'd also revised the bylaws to add better financial oversight and limit individual board member authority. "We've learned a lot from this situation," Patricia said. "Mainly that HOA boards need checks and balances just like any other organization. No single person should have the kind of power Rebecca had." Dave Miller raised his hand. "I move that we officially thank Kyle Norton for standing up to the abuse of power and ultimately exposing the financial crimes." The motion passed unanimously. They even gave me a plaque, which was a bit embarrassing but also kind of nice. As I drove home that night with the plaque on my passenger seat, I reflected on the whole crazy year. It had started with a simple firewood delivery and ended with arrests, trials, and major HOA reform. All because one person couldn't accept that they didn't control everything. The firewood business continued to grow. By the following spring, Marcus and I had opened a small retail location in addition to the home operation. We specialized in cooking woods, exotic hardwoods, and custom cutting. The Charlotte restaurant scene really embraced us, and we started supplying several high-end steakhouses and barbecue joints. I kept the home operation running too, though at a smaller scale. There was something satisfying about working in my own driveway, processing wood while watching the neighborhood go about its business. Kids would ride by on bikes, neighbors would wave, and everything felt normal and peaceful. Henderson stopped by one afternoon in April while I was splitting some cherry wood. "Hey Kyle, you got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" "I wanted to thank you for standing up to Rebecca back then. She'd been making my life hell for 2 years. I heard about the mailbox thing." That was just the start. She tried to fine me for my grass being a 1/4 inch too tall, said my recycling bin was visible from the street on non-collection days. Even complained that my dog barked too much, and I don't have a dog, I laughed. "Sounds like she had it out for you." Point is, you fighting back, that gave the rest of us courage. Patricia's a way better president. She actually cares about the community, not just bossing people around. Henderson wasn't the only one who expressed similar sentiments. Over the next few months, several neighbors thanked me for standing up to Rebecca's overreach. It felt good knowing that the whole ordeal had resulted in positive changes. The 1-year anniversary of Rebecca's conviction came and went. I was loading a delivery truck when Patricia stopped by. "Kyle, got a second?" "Of course. The board's been talking. We want to do something to commemorate what happened, turn it into a positive." "What did you have in mind?" "We're proposing a homeowner rights section in the bylaws. Clear definitions of what the board can and can't do, mandatory waiting periods before fines take effect, an appeals process, and limits on individual board member authority. We're calling it the Norton Amendment." I felt my face get warm. "That's really not necessary." "Yes, it is. What happened to you could happen to anyone. We want to make sure future residents are protected." The Norton Amendment passed with overwhelming homeowner support. Reading the final version, I was impressed by how thorough it was. Clear procedures, defined limits, protection against harassment. If these rules had been in place when Rebecca was president, none of the drama would have happened. Business kept me busy through the summer. We landed a major contract with a chain of pizza restaurants that wanted authentic wood-fired oven fuel. Marcus handled most of the retail location while I focused on production and wholesale accounts. In September, almost 2 years after that first firewood delivery, I got an unexpected phone call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Kyle Norton," a woman's voice, tentative and quiet. "Yes." "This is Rebecca Bradshaw." I almost dropped the phone. "Rebecca, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I wouldn't blame you if you hung up, but I wanted to call before my parole hearing next month." I sat down on my porch steps. "Okay." I wanted to apologize for everything. The harassment, the complaints, the lawsuit. All of it. You were following the rules, and I made your life hell because I couldn't stand not being in control. Why are you calling now? Part of my therapy in here has been accepting responsibility for what I did. Not just the embezzlement, but the way I treated people. I destroyed my own life because I couldn't let go of power that wasn't even real. Rebecca, I appreciate the apology. I really do. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did wrong. Your business, it's legitimate and good. You're helping people and contributing to the community. I should have supported that instead of fighting it. We talked for a few more minutes. She told me about the financial literacy classes she was teaching other inmates, how she'd gotten her CPA license back, how she was planning to rebuild her life somewhere far from Willowbrook Estates. "I'm not coming back to Charlotte," she said. "Too many bridges burned. My daughter lives in Asheville now, so I'll probably go there. Start over where nobody knows me as the crazy HOA lady." After we hung up, I sat on the porch for a long time. The call had been surreal. This woman who'd made my life miserable for months, who'd stolen from her neighbors, who'd ended up in prison, had sounded genuinely remorseful and broken. Marcus found me there an hour later. "You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." Rebecca Bradshaw called me. "No way." What did she want? To apologize. I told him about the conversation. Marcus listened, then shook his head. "That's wild. Do you believe her?" "I think so. She sounded different, not angry or defensive, just tired and sad." "Well, at least she's taking responsibility." That's more than most people do. The parole hearing happened in October. I wasn't there, but Patricia called me afterward to let me know Rebecca had been granted parole with strict conditions. She had to continue paying restitution, couldn't serve on any HOA boards, and had to stay in counseling. "She's moving to Asheville like she said," Patricia told me. "Her daughter confirmed it. We won't be seeing her around here again." Thanksgiving that year was particularly meaningful. Marcus and I hosted dinner at my house, inviting some of the neighbors who'd supported me through the whole ordeal. Henderson brought his famous sweet potato casserole. Dave and his wife brought wine. Patricia and her husband came with a turkey that barely fit in my oven. We sat around my dining room table, telling stories and laughing. At one point, Henderson raised his glass. "A toast," he said. "To Kyle, for having the courage to stand up to tyranny, even when it came in the form of a middle-aged woman with a clipboard." Everyone laughed and clinked glasses. "And to second chances," I added, thinking about my conversation with Rebecca. "For all of us." The business continued to flourish into the winter. We hired 3 more employees and started doing educational workshops about sustainable forestry and proper firewood seasoning. Marcus suggested we start a YouTube channel, which I thought was silly until the videos started getting thousands of views. "People love this stuff," Marcus said, showing me the analytics. "How to identify different wood types, best woods for smoking different meats, how to stack for proper drying." It's fascinating. The YouTube channel brought in even more business. We started shipping nationwide, sending cooking woods to enthusiasts all over the country. The little side business I'd started had become a legitimate company with real growth potential. In February, I was featured in a Charlotte Business Journal article about successful home-based businesses. The reporter asked about the HOA situation, and I kept my answers diplomatic. It was a learning experience for everyone involved, I said. The community has better governance now, and I have a thriving business. Sometimes conflict can lead to positive change. The article mentioned Rebecca only in passing, noting that the previous HOA president had been convicted of embezzlement. The focus was on my business success and the new homeowner protections in the bylaws. Spring brought new challenges and opportunities. A national outdoor living retailer approached us about stocking our products in their stores. It would require scaling up production significantly, maybe even moving beyond the home-based operation entirely. Marcus and I spent weeks crunching numbers and weighing options. Finally, we made the decision. We'd lease a commercial facility, but keep a small operation at my house for specialty products and custom orders. It's the end of an era, Marcus said as we loaded the log splitter onto a trailer. Not really, I replied. It's just evolution. The business started here, and will always have roots here. On moving day, several neighbors came out to help and say goodbye to the backyard operation that had caused so much drama. Henderson brought a case of beer. Dave helped load equipment. Even Patricia stopped by with cookies. You know, Patricia said, in a weird way, Rebecca did us all a favor. Without her causing problems, we never would have examined our HOA procedures so carefully. The new bylaws protect everyone. That's a generous way to look at it. I'm serious. Sometimes it takes a crisis to force necessary change. She was the crisis, and you were the catalyst for change. The new facility was in an industrial park off Highway 74, about 20 minutes from my house. It had proper equipment, climate-controlled storage, and enough space to triple our production. We hired an operations manager, brought on more staff, and really professionalized the whole operation. But I still kept a small setup at home. Just a modest amount of specialty woods, my original splitting block, and the tools I'd started with. On weekends, I'd work there, processing unique pieces, experimenting with new techniques, keeping the connection to where it all began. One Saturday in May, I was working on some reclaimed barn wood when a car pulled up. I didn't recognize it at first, but when the woman got out, I realized it was Bethany Bradshaw again. "Hi, Kyle," she said. "I hope I'm not bothering you, not at all. What brings you by?" "I wanted to give you this." She held out an envelope. Mom wanted me to deliver it personally. I opened it carefully. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a handwritten letter. "Kyle," the letter read in neat cursive. "I can never fully make amends for what I put you through, but I want to try. This money represents part of what I've earned since getting out. I'm working as a bookkeeper in Asheville and slowly rebuilding. I'm sending similar amounts to others I hurt. Please use this for your business, or donate it to charity, or burn it if that would make you feel better. I just need you to know that I recognize the harm I caused, and I'm spending the rest of my life trying to be better. Rebecca." I read it twice, then looked at Bethany. She doesn't need to do this. She wants to. It's important to her recovery, making actual amends, not just saying sorry. How is she doing? Better. She's in therapy twice a week, works at a small accounting firm, lives alone in a tiny apartment. It's humble, but she seems more at peace than I've seen her in years. I thought about it for a moment, then made a decision. Tell your mom thank you and that I accept her apology, but I'm donating this money to a financial literacy program for young people. The cycle of bad financial decisions needs to break somewhere. Bethany smiled. She'll like that. Thank you for being gracious. After she left, I sat with the letter for a while. The whole situation had come full circle. Rebecca had hit rock bottom, but she was climbing back up by actually taking responsibility. That took courage. The donated money went to Junior Achievement of Greater Charlotte, specifically their financial literacy programs. They sent a nice thank you letter, and I felt good knowing something positive had come from Rebecca's restitution. Summer was busy at the new facility. We were producing more firewood and wood products than I'd ever imagined possible. The retail location was thriving. The YouTube channel had over 100,000 subscribers. Marcus and I had built something real and lasting, but the best part wasn't the business success. It was the lesson learned about standing up for what's right, about not backing down when someone abuses authority, about how one person's courage can inspire a whole community to demand better governance. Henderson still jokes that I should run for HOA president. I always laugh it off. I've had enough HOA drama for a lifetime. But I stay involved, attend meetings, vote on important issues. The HOA is part of the community, and when it's run properly, it makes life better for everyone. On the 3rd anniversary of that first firewood delivery, I hosted a barbecue at my house. The wood was oak, naturally, properly seasoned and perfect for smoking. Neighbors came, friends came, employees came. We filled my backyard with laughter and good food. Patricia made a speech thanking me again for standing up to corruption. Dave told the story of the great firewood confrontation for the 100th time, embellishing it more with each retelling. Henderson claimed he knew I'd win from the start, which was definitely not true. As the sun set and people started heading home, Marcus and I stood in the driveway where it had all begun. 3 years, Marcus said. From one woman yelling at you to a 6-figure business. That's quite a journey. It's been interesting, that's for sure. Would you do it again? Knowing everything that would happen, I thought about that. The stress, the harassment, the legal battles. But also the friendships formed, the community improvements, the business success, and even Rebecca's eventual redemption. Yeah, I said finally. I would, because it was right. The firewood business continues today. We're expanding into furniture now, using reclaimed wood and sustainable sourcing. The YouTube channel gets millions of views. We employ 15 people and contribute to the local economy. But more importantly, Willowbrook Estates has become a model for HOA governance. Other neighborhoods have adopted versions of the Norton Amendment. Patricia serves on a county committee advising on HOA regulations. The community is genuinely better than it was before. Sometimes I drive by Rebecca's old house. A young family lives there now with 2 kids and a golden retriever. They're nice people, always wave when they see me. They have no idea their home used to belong to someone who caused so much chaos. That's probably for the best. The past is past. What matters is that we all learned something and moved forward. Rebecca learned that control isn't power, and that hurting others only destroys yourself. The community learned to demand accountability from its leaders. And I learned that standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, is always worth it. The commercial invoice that started everything is framed in my office at the commercial facility. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that documentation matters, that following the rules protects you, and that sometimes the simplest things can trigger the biggest changes. Every time a new employee asks about it, I tell them the story. Not to make myself look good, but to emphasize the importance of doing things right, having your paperwork in order, and never letting bullies intimidate you into giving up. Life in Willowbrook Estates is quiet now, peaceful in the way suburban neighborhoods are supposed to be. The HOA maintains common areas, enforces reasonable rules, and stays out of people's business. Property values are actually up, despite Rebecca's dire predictions. Turns out letting people run legitimate businesses from their homes doesn't destroy neighborhoods after all. On particularly nice evenings, I'll sit on my front porch with a beer and watch the neighborhood. Kids playing, people walking dogs, neighbors chatting across property lines. This is what community is supposed to be. Not rules and restrictions and control, but people living their lives together, supporting each other, and letting everyone find their own path. The firewood that caused so much trouble just keeps burning, warming homes and cooking food all across Charlotte and beyond. And every log I split, every order I fill, every customer I help, I remember that day when a truck pulled up my driveway and changed everything. Rebecca was wrong about a lot of things, but she was right about one. That delivery did change the neighborhood, just not in the way she feared. It changed it for the better, forcing us all to examine how we govern ourselves and treat each other. Sometimes the best transformations come from the most unexpected conflicts. And sometimes all it takes is one person refusing to back down, one commercial invoice, and one very determined HOA president learning the hardest possible lesson about the limits of authority and the price of corruption. The story has a happy ending for almost everyone involved. My business thrives. The community is stronger. Even Rebecca found a path to redemption and a chance to rebuild her life on better foundations. That's more than I hoped for when I signed for that firewood delivery 3 years ago, watching Rebecca storm across the street with fury in her eyes. I just wanted to start a small business and make some extra money. Instead, I became part of a transformation that proved ordinary people can stand up to abuse of power and win. And really, isn't that what living in a community is all about? Not just following rules or maintaining property values, but standing up for each other, demanding accountability from leaders, and refusing to let anyone turn your neighborhood into their personal kingdom. The wood keeps burning, the business keeps growing, and life in Willowbrook Estates keeps getting better. That's the real end of the story, the part that matters most. Not the conflict or the drama, but the lasting positive change that came from refusing to accept abuse of authority. Every neighborhood has its challenges, every HOA its problems. But when people come together and demand better, real change is possible. The commercial invoice still hangs in my office, a simple piece of paper that represents so much more. It represents standing up for what's right. It represents the power of documentation and following proper procedures. And it represents the beginning of a journey that changed my life, my neighborhood, and even gave one fallen HOA president a chance at redemption. Not bad for 14 tons of firewood.